In just 9 minutes, uncover 10 mind-blowing takeaways from Joe Rogan's talk with Luke Caverns on lost civilizations, forbidden archaeology, ancient shamans, and why smart people are questioning what history books got wrong. This one will change how you see the past. Takeaway 1. Lost civilizations may explain ancient ruins. Joe Rogan and Luke Caverns talk about the possibility that our current history books are missing key chapters. According to Luke, many ancient structures, like the ones in Egypt, don't make sense when you look at the tools archaeologists say people had at the time. He brings up how there is a mismatch between simple tools and extremely complex buildings like the pyramids. This has led some people, like Graham Hancock, to suggest there may have been a lost civilization with more advanced knowledge that existed before the known ones. Luke agrees that something doesn't add up, and the mystery is worth exploring further. He says even if you don't agree with the idea of a lost civilization, it's important to admit there are big unanswered questions. For example, the ruins at Göbekli Tepe in Turkey show that people were building complex structures more than 11,000 years ago, which doesn't fit the usual story that we went from cavemen to farmers to city builders slowly. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 2. The Amazon may hold forgotten cities. Luke Caverns shares how explorers like Percy Fawcett believe the Amazon rainforest hides the remains of a once great civilization. Fawcett documented structured villages and advanced societies that were nothing like the primitive tribes many assumed lived there. Luke explains how early explorers saw stone foundations, elegant clothing, and people who spoke beautifully and sang in groups. Fawcett even found statues made of exotic materials, which hinted at a culture much more refined than expected. Luke says the Portuguese document, known as Manuscript 512, even talks about a massive stone city in Brazil, described with statues resembling Greek gods. For example, explorers found detailed roads and raised causeways in the jungle, which wouldn't have been needed unless these were large, well-organized cities. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 3. Ancient wisdom may have been wiped out. Joe and Luke discuss how much ancient knowledge may have been lost due to disasters, invasions, and colonial destruction. Luke brings up the burning of the Library of Alexandria and how the Spaniards burned nearly all Mayan books in one city alone. Entire libraries were lost in bonfires, erasing generations of writing and discovery. He explains that today we have just 3 or 4 Mayan codices left, and one of them might not even be real. This destruction makes it hard for modern people to understand just how advanced those civilizations might have been. For example, when the Spanish arrived in Aztec territory, that civilization was creating over 200,000 paper documents a year, which shows they had a deep written culture that's now mostly gone. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 4. Institutions block new historical ideas. Joe Rogan and Luke Caverns talk about how traditional academic systems often act as gatekeepers who decide what counts as real history. Luke says many archaeologists feel threatened by new ideas and will attack others instead of debating with facts. Joe agrees, saying it happens in many fields where older experts don't want to give up control. Luke says the worst part is that universities reward this behavior by only promoting people who stay inside a narrow viewpoint. For example, when Luke applied to study classics in Greece, he eventually realized the academic world would limit what he could explore, so he walked away from that path entirely to stay independent. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 5. Independent researchers are changing the game. The podcast highlights how people without official degrees are making a big impact on how we understand history. Joe and Luke say independent researchers like Jimmy Corsetti and Graham Hancock have more freedom to follow the facts wherever they lead. These creators document sites, ask hard questions, and connect with large audiences. Their work often pushes archaeology forward in ways that universities no longer can. Luke believes that freedom from institutional rules makes their findings more honest and more interesting. For example, Jimmy Corsetti has built a huge following by pointing out unexplained things like the transport of 80-ton stones in ancient Lebanon, while academics still act like it's not a big deal. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 6. Modern archaeology is becoming the Wild West. Luke Caverns talks about how the field of archaeology is undergoing a huge shift. With social media, YouTube, and podcasts, younger voices like his are getting attention without needing university support. Joe calls it the Wild West of archaeology where anyone with curiosity and courage can go out and make a discovery. Luke shares that, while he can't legally dig without permits, he can explore, document, and inspire others with his findings. He says people in their 20s and 30s now have a real shot at shaping the field by going out into the jungle or desert and just asking the questions nobody else dares to ask. For example, Luke's own explorations in the Amazon led him to discover the stone remains of villages that no map had ever marked. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 7. Gatekeepers fear losing control of history. Joe and Luke discuss how certain powerful people in archaeology, like Egypt's Zahi Hawass, have acted like they alone get to define what is true. Luke says the attitude of these people is aggressive and dismissive, especially toward anyone outside the academic circle. They attack independent voices and try to stop new discoveries from being taken seriously. Joe says this is a common problem in many areas of science and education. For example, when someone brings up water erosion at the Sphinx in Egypt, some experts just insult the messenger rather than discuss the evidence. It's not about truth, it's about control. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 8. Psychedelics and ancient cultures may be linked. Luke Caverns talks about how hallucinogenic plants like peyote and cannabis may have helped ancient cultures understand the stars, nature, and maybe even develop spiritual systems. He says this is a sensitive topic because older archaeologists often dismiss it outright. But Luke shares how, in Mexico, he sat around with an archaeoastronomer and tried to have a serious talk about how psychedelics might have helped ancient people map the stars or understand their gods. The scholar refused to even consider it. For example, some Aztec statues and glyphs show psychedelic plants being placed into bags by gods, hinting that these substances had sacred and scientific use. Now let's move to the next takeaway. Takeaway 9. Luke Caverns' life is built on exploration. Luke shares his personal story of how exploration runs in his blood. His grandfather searched for Spanish gold mines in New Mexico and opened a mining company that operated for 8 years. When a smelter explosion caused the company to shut down, Luke's family lost everything and fell into poverty. But this legacy of exploration stayed alive through family stories. Luke originally went to college for marketing, but after watching the movie The Lost City of Z about explorer Percy Fawcett, he realized he had to follow his true passion. For example, Luke switched to studying cultural anthropology and wrote his thesis on lost Amazonian civilizations, believing that this was his true purpose all along. Now let's move to the last takeaway. Takeaway 10. The past is more mysterious than we think. Joe Rogan and Luke Caverns end the podcast by reflecting on how little we really know about our human story. Luke says once you look deeply into history, you realize that many accepted facts are shaky. Joe adds that we weren't given a choice to be born in this time, so we have to figure out how we got here. They talk about how big events like asteroid impacts, lost cities, and ancient advanced societies all hint at a past much richer than we've been told. For example, Luke says just one global power outage lasting 6 months could wipe out most modern knowledge, showing how fragile our own civilization really is. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, hit the thanks button below. It really helps us keep going. If you enjoyed this summary, please leave a like and share it in your WhatsApp groups. To join discussion about this video, drop a comment below. And for more videos like this, hit the subscribe button below.